fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master.
Do you not know death when you see it, old man? This is my power.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Fell Beast painting. In this one I'll be starting off with the piece I missed out from the last video, which was the Ethereal priming part. So in my airbrush at the minute is Polyurethane Grey Primer by Vallejo. So as you can see, I'm just highlighting the areas of the upper part of the wing with the grey primer. So this basically acts as my highlight. I leave the underside black. Okay, so very quick step, just gives you that extra bit of highlighting. Again, top of the body where the light would hit him. This is a very light misting. Again, that's my cheap Chinese airbrush with the 0.5mm nozzle setup. Okay, now the primer's had a few hours to dry. I make a mix of Vallejo black grey. You could use any dark grey for this. Citadel make the Adeptus Battle Grey. I'm not sure what its new name is, but any dark grey will work for this. This is thinned approximately 2:1 with Vallejo airbrush thinner. Just giving the whole thing a all over base coat. The primary colour of the flesh of the fell beast is like a dark grey. So this is where you see the ethereal priming coming into itself because of the light colour underneath and the thinness of the paint. The sort of gives you that depth of highlighting, so you haven't got to do as much highlighting later. Oh, the airbrush I'm using in this is one of my Iwatas. This is the C Custom Plus. It's out of production now. The new version's slightly different looking. So now I'm making a mix of Codex Grey and Elf Flesh. This is sort of going to be stippled onto the belly of the fell beast. You can see here I'm using an old stiff-haired brush and just stippling it on. Although I did change my mind later on and went back in with a different colour. I'll explain that when we get to that part in the video. This is rotting flesh. Just adding a tiny bit of this to my elf flesh and Codex Grey mix. Okay, then I went in with Vallejo black, soft body black wash, and this was thinned about 3 parts thinner. I'm using Vallejo airbrush thinner for this. I find it's awesome for thinning washes down. because I find the Vallejo wash is quite thick and very dark. I prefer the sort of lighter colour. You could use null oil for this, or Badab Black, or whatever black wash you're using. Thinned it down quite a bit and ran it through my airbrush, save on application. Get a lot more smoother application as well with the airbrush. You could do this by hand with a brush if you wanted to, but I just find it's easier just to mist it on with the airbrush. Make sure you have your airbrush on quite a low PSI, about 10. Just to tint the colour of the flesh. Now we're to the point I'm mixing up some Chaos Black and Codex Grey. This is the point where I changed my mind and thought the contrast was not quite good enough for the belly to the flesh. Basically repeated the step that I did before with the Elf Flesh, Rotting Flesh and Codex Grey mix that I stippled on earlier. I'm just stippling on the black with the Codex Grey, just because I felt it didn't have enough contrast between that and the light flesh on top. I'm not quite covering up all of the work I did. Probably about 85% of the work I did last time I'm covering over with this colour, because I quite liked the idea of the lighter flesh at the top. So now I'm using Codex Grey and Dwarf Flesh this time. It's much more of a peachy coloured flesh. And this is about 1:1. Exactly the same application as before. So as you can see, I'm just stippling it on, leaving a little bit of the Chaos Black and Codex Grey behind. This is sort of my mid-tone. Okay, so now it's Codex Grey and Elf Flesh this time. Approximately 1:1 again. Again, this was just stippled onto the surface. Not quite as covering as much as I did with the Elf Flesh, so you're giving that depth of highlights on there. Because I looked at a lot of reference photos from the movie and they're quite speckled underneath. Kind of like lots of different mid-grey and flesh tones in there. As well as I looked at a painting guide that was in the Lord of the Rings Journey book. I think it was the Two Towers one. This time I'm using Rotting Flesh as well as a final highlight, and adding that to my Codex Grey and Elf Flesh mix. Exactly the same step as I did before. This is the final highlight. This is kind of just dry brushed over very lightly. So now I'm base coating all the metal areas with Boltgun Metal. You could use Gunmetal Grey from Vallejo or any gunmetal colour. Pretty much they're all the same. base coating all the parts of his harness, his armour on his head, the Witch King's helmet and armour he wears underneath his robes, etc. I did add a little bit of glaze medium to this metal colour as well, just to help it flow a little bit better. Making sure I get 100% coverage. Okay, now I've got some Chaos Black. I'm going to use this to base coat his robes. It's just thin with regular tap water. Just being very careful with the application not to get it all over the parts I've just painted. So now I'm adding a little bit of Codex Grey to the mix, and then I'm using this to base coat all the claws and spines on the fell beast. Okay, this is just to contrast the spines from his flesh, just to give him that little bit of extra differentiation between the two. Okay, now I've added a bit more water to the mix, and I'm going to use the slightly watered down mix to blend in the tail to the flesh, because his tail's got a big spine on it. And now I'm going to make a wash with tin bits. It's sort of a brassy colour, and this is going to be just applied to the recesses of the metalwork, so around the fell beast's armour and on the Witch King's armour, just to give it that slightly old and tarnished look. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Next time you'll see the flames painted on the Nazgûl and the wings being painted as well. So thank you very much for watching. Please comment, rate and subscribe, and share it with your friends if you like this tutorial. Cheers!